Thank you for joining me today. In this video, I will walk you through the setup for your Raspberry Pi Zero. Now, let's have a look at what we should have to go through this setup. You should have a Raspberry Pi Zero, a power cable, an SD card, a RS-32 or UART cable, and finally, if you're taking the operating systems course, you will need an add-on board. Now, the first thing we should do is going to be burning a valid image into this SD card. So remove the SD card from its packaging. And insert it in this way. Now let's put it in our computer and burn an image into it. Now that we have inserted our SD card into our computer, we can proceed to write the operating system onto the SD card. In this case, I'm using a Linux computer, but if you're using Windows or Mac, it is the same program. Just install PyImager from the official Raspberry website and you'll be good to go. The first thing we should do is choose the operating system that we should be installing. In my case, since I am taking the operating systems course, I will be installing a custom image, but usually you can just install the default OS. In this case, to install a custom image, I will select the option Use Custom from the menu, and I will find my image here. Now, if you click on Choose SD card, you should find your SD card listed if you have inserted it into your computer correctly. Now let's click on Write, and now we can simply wait until this completes. Now that the image has been burned into the SD card, we can continue with the next part. Now that we have burned the image into the SD card, we may insert the SD card into the Raspberry Pi. The next thing we will do is connect the UART adapter onto the Raspberry Pi. If you have the shield from the operating systems lab, this is simple enough. Simply connect the shield and follow the colors. So black goes in the black, orange in the orange, and yellow in the yellow. However, if you do not have the shield, let us have a look at where you should connect the pins. Looking at the outer pins, from the SD card's side, you're going to count to 3, and at the third pin, you will connect the black wire. Then at the fourth pin, you will connect the yellow wire. Finally, at the fifth pin, you will connect the orange wire. Now that your UART is connected, let's first connect the UART to a USB port on our computer. Then plug in the power cord on the USB that's marked power. Plug it in. Now we will see how to access the Raspberry Pi through the UART connection, first on Linux and then on Windows. On Linux, open up a terminal of your choice. Now we're going to use the screen command to access the Raspberry Pi. If you do not have the screen command, then if you're on a Ubuntu, you can install it by using sudo apt install screen. Now, your UART adapter, it's most likely going to be under deb tty USB 0, but it could also be under deb tty USB 1, or any number for that matter. But in this case, it is under deb tty USB 0, and you have to take care to set the bitrate to 115,200. Now, if we press enter, once you're here, you can enter the login credentials. In the case of this image, the username is Pi, and the password is Raspberry. Now we are in. Now let's look how to access the Raspberry Pi via Windows. First of all, let's check Device Manager. Here you should check under ports, COM and LPT ports. You should check the number of the port. In this case, it's COM6. Next, open PuTTY. You should install this program. Now select serial connection. You're gonna use the port that you saw just briefly before, COM6. And the speed is going to be 11.5,200. Now let's click on open. And let's type in our username and password, in this case Raspberry. And there we go. Now we have access to the Pi shell. Go and edit this file with Nano. Now we can add our own network. So what we will do is we will add a network at the end of the file. You should add a network block to the file and add the name of your network under SSID and the network's password. Once you have done this, press Ctrl X to exit, press Y to save, press enter. Now that you have entered your network's data, run this command to connect to the network. If this was successful, after a few seconds, you should be able to run IPA and see that your WLAN 0 interface has an IP address. Now you have access to the internet from your Raspberry Pi. Let us install the best text editor, that is to say Emacs. This will install the CLI version of Emacs, that is to say the version without graphics. Now that we have Emacs installed, the Raspberry Pi is set up and ready to be used. But let's look at how we can access it through SSH. Let me show you how you can find the IP of your Raspberry Pi easily. The first thing you want to do is install the Nmap utility using sudo apt install nmap, for example. And now run it with nmap-s capital P. A IP address in your subnet could be your own local IP address, /24. This will give us all the devices connected to our network. The device listed as CSE2430 is the one that we are looking for. In this case, the IP address is 192.168.1.153. Let's access the Raspberry Pi by that IP that we found. Answer yes. Input the password that we used before. And now we are in. In case you're wondering how we managed to communicate with the Raspberry Pi through that dongle and those 3 wires, what we are using is a UART. And what happens in this protocol is that you set a baud rate, and both devices then take charge of sending bits at that rate and reading bits at that rate. And what I have done here is I have set the dongle to output a constant stream of A's. I am sending the character A through the wire, and as you can see, this is the signal. What happens is that you have a stop bit, then you have the bits, and you have an end bit. There can be other configurations, but this is the most common, and you can see it here on the oscilloscope.